That's the moment the Party for Socialism and Liberation says was inaudible in the critical incident video showing the police shooting that killed Adam Sykes.
Today we tell Mike Brown and the ruling class that we won't be divided. We've seen these tricks before. Immigrants are not dangerous. Capitalism is.
Welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a weekly podcast brought to you by the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Dani Abdullah, and I'm joined by my comrade and co-host,
Derek Ford.
We're here to guide you through the pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of our people, not our oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen.
So we have kind of a unique episode today as we continue preparing for May Day, International Workers' Day, which ironically has its origins not far away in Chicago in the late 19th century, but is really rarely celebrated in the United States and really only became an annual celebration and militant celebration of the worker struggle in 2006 with the immigrant led really general strike that took place. So we are going to talk a little bit about, to help provide some clarity for those who may not know what a general strike is, even what a worker is, right? That's a term we throw around a lot, but what do we mean by that? And also to, historical precedents and what you can expect and some places you can be when you are on strike. So yeah, Dani, I don't know if there's one that you want to hit up first or what.
I mean, not to put me on the spot or anything. No. I think
there's only one right answer, by the way. Just kidding.
There's only one answer?
There's only one right answer to my question, but I was kidding.
Oh my God. Just like a white man. No. No, I feel like I would like to as far as getting into strikes. I mean, in the United States, we were actually just reading, as a branch, we've been reading Imperialism, and there's a part in it, Lenin's Imperialism. There's a part in it where where comrades who are kind of doing the preface for the book talk about how there is a history of strikes, and there's a very strong presence of workers in our country. And just like you said, Derek, it's not actually talked about. It's not actually acknowledged in our country, the strides that the people have gone to make sure we have rights, make sure the children are taken care of, to make sure that the people are taken care of. I know you mentioned Chicago, but even I think I was talking to Lucas on an episode about the work that was put in Gary, Indiana, of the people there and white and Black people coming together and industrial workers coming together and fighting for their rights. And it's not talked about, it's not discussed. And so I think there's and I only mentioned those two, but that's the Midwest, right? Which, I'm biased a little bit, but I think the Midwest is one of the greatest places in this country, and there's so much revolutionary power and optimism in the Midwest. So I'm down to talk about whatever. I know we're gonna also be we're gonna be hearing from Dakota, who is our producer in this episode, and Dakota is gonna be talking about his union, which is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. And Dakota's going to be talking to us about the importance of being in a union, and the importance of what benefits come from being in a union, because there's so many. And unfortunately, we live in a time in our country where unions are not popular, which is unfortunate. So, yeah.
Yeah, but they are gaining popularity, I think, as people realize that, oh, wait a second, union density coincided with mass, a mass decrease in my standard of living, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a kind of spontaneous knowledge, but nonetheless, like looking over worldwide, like it's the U.S. is the exception for sure, not the rule, which it tends to be, right? We're accepted from international law, and everything. So, thinking about, first in Madison, Wisconsin, and I start here because I remember when this is happening, and it's not too long ago, 2011, which actually for some of the listeners might be long ago, but Dani and I are old souls.
I was gonna say
we'll
that.
just say,
Yeah.
So the whole incident went down basically because Governor Scott Walker, who was like a Brownite before there were Brownites, in February of 2011, he announced his budget repair bill, eliminating most collective bargaining rights for public employees and unions, and required increased contributions for benefits. So if you're unionizing, you never sign on to a union unless you're going to get more than you pay in dues. That's just
Right.
rule number one, right? That's basic ass common sense. But they try to use that they're going to take all your money and get rich, And so the very next day, union leaders started organizing workers to testify. The next day, the first protests emerged in front of the Capitol and in front of the governor's mansion. And then 1,000 students demonstrated, and then the occupation began on February 15th of 2011. So this is a matter of 4 days. They occupied the Capitol building for quite some time, and it grew, and it grew. People traveled from all over to join. By February 19th, 100,000 people were at the Capitol, countered by less than 3,000 pro-Walker, Tea Party supporters. That was back then. Even Reverend Jesse Jackson led students to East High School, as many teachers, went back to school. And then audio was released of a prank call between Walker and a man he thought was billionaire campaign contributioner David Koch. So Walker admits he thought about planting provocateurs among the protesters at the Capitol and outlines plans to get Senate Democrats to return, right?
Wow.
So after 10 days of continuous occupation and protests, Capitol officials proposed closing the building at night, which is, these tactics they use, shutting out hundreds of protesters, and state troopers were dispatched to the homes of some Senate Democrats. Ultimately, whether we judge something as a success or a defeat, depends on our qualifications for those. Right. It was a record turnout. On March 12th, 185,000 people. This is Madison, Wisconsin, took to the streets, right, for 29 consecutive days and nights of protests. And so even though the anti-union law did take effect on June 29th, it was a win for our people because how many people, that was their first experience, not at a protest, but at a occupation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Students, workers. And this was also, around the time of the North African Spring at that time, right? And people from Egypt were sending them pizzas and,
That's amazing.
I'd say, it's really incredible. One of the first times that happened. So, they lost the battle, but they're winning the war.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's for that to be somebody's first time organizing or doing anything. And also Madison, Wisconsin is in the Midwest. I don't know if again, Midwest is there
we go.
Midwest
That's why I chose
is
it.
about it, Midwest is about it. It's not a loss because there's so many lessons that we can learn from that we can take from that, and we can utilize that now today. 2011 was not that long ago. I guess there are probably some listeners who are like, oh my God, I was 4 years old.
Not even born then.
Right. Yeah. Not even born. Yeah. Which is actually wild. Yeah. I know for a fact there are listeners who were not born yet in 2011. Yeah. There's so many lessons that we can take from that, and it's the point of unions, the point of mobilizations or, demonstrations like that, where the people come together and are able to show up for each other, show out for each other is it is another reminder that the ruling class tries to make us think that we need to elect some official who studied politics, you know, in undergrad and grad school or whatever, and like this is their livelihood. This is all they do, and like they're so much smarter than us and whatever. And like in actuality, we do not need that, right? Like we actually can run things ourselves. And we do. Yeah, and we do, right? We're perfectly capable of doing that, and we do it every day, actually. As quiet as it's kept, and it's not actually that quiet anymore. People every day are waking up more and more to it. But like, I mean, if you've ever at any point been like, what's that show? It's called like Undercover Boss or something, and like the like CEOs, they come in and they're like, I have no idea how to flip this burger.
Oh no, okay,
like,
I didn't know it was like that.
Yeah, and it's like they pretend
dumb.
to be like a worker, but like. They're the CEO, and they have no idea how to run the business.
The workers are teaching them, about their own business.
Yeah, and I feel like that's like such a, and the workers don't know that they're the CEO, right? Because they're undercover. But like, that's such a good example of like, exactly, right? Like
that show wouldn't be popular unless people could relate to it,
exactly,
and then be like, yeah, my boss is because my manager's a dumbass.
You know? Literally, like I remember, I feel like I talk about Taco Bell so much on here, but I remember like being.
You can't talk about Taco Bell too much.
But I remember like learning the job and then like doing my manager's job like for them, and like I was so young and I just was like, I'm just trying to be helpful, and I'm like, and I was a teenager and I didn't know any better. I would never do that now, but like I knew how to do it, and I could do it better than them. A lot of them, not all of them. Some of them were like really good managers. But like a lot of them I could do it better than them. And so I would do it. And like that was me as a teenager who just like figured it out. And like, let alone like if a GM came in and like, you don't know what you're doing. You know, the people know how to like run the country, and we do it every day.
Absolutely. We are the ones who make the world run. So we're the ones who should run the world. And thank you, Dani, for that. So after a short break, we will be right back with Dakota Fronterhouse talking about his firsthand recent experience on the importance of being in the union. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Naptown People's Radio here. So as we continue building for May Day, or International Workers' Day, which ironically originated in the U.S. but is not really celebrated in the U.S. except for by the people, we wanted to bring in a contemporary example of the absolute necessity to unionize under capitalism, and to bring to the fore just a few of the protections, the benefits and rights that unions guarantee workers. We have with us here our local producer, Dakota Fronterhouse, who's also an apprentice with IATSE Local 30, the International Association of Theatrical Stagehand Employees. And you won't be surprised to learn that one of his many specializations is the sound field. So welcome to the show, Dakota.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, how does it feel to be on this end of it?
It's a lot more nerve-wracking to be behind the mic rather than behind the screen editing, but it's great. I love it.
We'll be sure to put your picture on this, the cover of it, this one. Thank you. So, yeah, I remember seeing photos of you doing your thing at the Final Four, curbside or not curbside.
Courtside.
Courtside, thank you. Yeah. Sorry, not a sports person, which is dope, and I'm sure many people were, envy. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm not a big sports guy either, so I'm learning the terminology as it goes. But yeah, I was for the Final Four. I was asked because of my sound background, to come help out, and like I wasn't running the board or anything, which I don't think I'd be comfortable yet doing that in front of 70,000 people. But I was down on the field, or the court, as you want to call it, just helping with the talent, which is basically the national anthem singers for each different day, helping them get comfortable, get ready with their microphones and in-ear monitors. Really easy work, but it's definitely important work to do. And I did it for a few days, and then I almost didn't get to finish it out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I had some security clearance. So how it works is, the IATSE, we're labor, right? We don't own the equipment, and we're there as help. We're union labor, and we're there. My lead and my foreman, they put in requests for big shows like that,
right,
for people who are going to be there when there's actual quote unquote talent, like the basketball players or whatever. They put in requests with security for clearance. And then it's usually granted, and I don't have anything awful in my background either. And then it was cleared, and I was there for a few days. And then, let's see, Monday, I can't remember the exact date, but the last day of the game, I get a phone call from our business agent. He's kind of the legal guy behind our contracts and everything, and he's the one who we call if we're in trouble. But he called me, and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to touch base with you because I got a word that you might do something silly during the game." And I was like, "Silly? What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He's
silly? Is that the word he used?
Yeah, he said silly.
Okay.
He might have said silly and crazy interchangeably a couple times, but I was like, I don't know what you mean. I'm
silly guy.
He's like, well, we got some reports that, you might go do something a little crazy in the middle of the game. I was like, well, expand on that. Like, who told you this? And where did they get this information? He's like, well, we saw that you've gone to some No Kings protests, and we saw your social media, and that, that you've posted a few things. And he didn't go into specific details, but he just kept saying, your digital fingerprint, is everywhere. And I was straight up with him. I was like, I'm with the PSL. I organize. I was like, my profile online is public. I was like, I don't do anything shady or wrong or bad. I just fight for workers' rights, people's rights, human rights. I was like, and I have no history of running in or streaking or whatever in the middle of a court or game. So who told you that? And he didn't really go into it, but he's like, I just want to make sure, it's all good. And then I went and talked to my foreman about it a little bit, and he was like, yeah, he's like, I was like, who did this? Because I was thinking maybe it was, and that comes to, so I'm not very high up in the union yet, right? And unions are typically on seniority, and at least mine is. And so I was thinking maybe someone was upset that I was getting a nice position on the field or whatever, running sound, and maybe someone was just
right,
making a mountain out of a molehill. And he's like, no, it wasn't any of our people. It was security here at the stadium or with Final Four or whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, that's the thing that's really irritating is you've been here for days. Did they not give you clearance for nothing? He's like, so they scrubbed you after the fact, and they called him that day and said, you need to get this guy off the call. And he was like, it's not happening. They're like, well, you need to get him off the call. And so he talked to my business agent, and they stuck up for me, and they were like, this is, you can't just get him off the call. He has his rights, and that's the whole thing with the union, right? They're like, you can't just do that because you want to do that, right?
Right, exactly. And if you didn't have a union, they can, And the other thing that's interesting to me is that it was Saturday when there was a demonstration, when there was the police, battery against Noah, or assault against our comrade Noah,
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't doing anything, quote unquote, silly during that time.
Right. Which, and maybe, come to think of it, maybe that is maybe the catalyst that made them look into me a little bit, or look into, people who are associated with the PSL and Liberation Center, is because of the demonstration on Saturday. But regardless, are we not allowed to have free speech? Is that not our number one thing in our Constitution, to be able to organize, be able to have free speech, be able to express our political opinions?
Yeah. And this is, again, another, minor instance, but that's how they minor instances accumulate, right? And accumulate. But for the new McCarthyism, or which is a continuation of the old, and then the older McCarthyism, where they straight up, the Smith Act was like, yes, you can send people to jail for their political beliefs, not for what their actions, but for their beliefs, right? And there was even a provision in it. It got struck down eventually, but where they were setting up concentration camps for communists.
Yeah. And plenty of union members were getting kicked out of their unions for being associated with the Communist Party.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So, this is, I think, a good example both of like that as well as how we fight it. And how do we fight it? We organize, we unionize, and we're real people. You didn't go off on some, diatribe about the capitalist ruling class and da 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 da, right? You were just relating to him.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I said too, was like, I have a family, I have a house, I have bills to pay. This is my job. I take it seriously. I like the union. I like what we do. I like my job. Like, I consider it like enjoyable. I'm not going to jeopardize that by like doing something quote unquote silly,
Right. And not to mention that would not look good for the party.
Exactly. And that's that's another thing I told him too. I said, I'm passionate about what I do outside of work. I was like, I am passionate about, the work we do with like PSL and the Liberation Center. And I was like, for me to just go, like, we've all seen the clips of people in soccer games in Europe where they go run on the field. Like, no one takes them seriously. I was like, I wouldn't jeopardize A, my job, and B, my party's stance and seriousness and professionalism just for a moment of silliness on TV.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, and is there anything else, any other lessons we can draw out of this, or conclusion, summation?
Unionize. Join a union if there is one in your field. Like, I was already doing this as part of my work, as a freelance, sound and video tech. And so I joined the IATSE because it's been around since 1890s. So if you can join a union, join one. If you can't, start one. And, and then also just like be honest, right? And that's the thing. Like I said, like I went straight up to my foreman and I was like, hey, what's up with this? Just had an open, honest conversation,
Yeah. And it's somewhat sad that because, it's like, be adults, but that's, where we are. And I also like be honest about your political positions. You didn't try to hide them, because there's no reason to. We should be proud. We are proud. We have a vision for the future.
Yeah.
None of these other political parties do, the mainstream ones.
Like the people who do hide are the ones who have something to hide, like the Proud Boys and the KKK. Those are people who you don't know who's actually in those organizations.
Right. They wear masks.
Yeah, we don't.
Exactly. Hogsett, right? He hides. Ryan Mears, he hides from the people, right? We don't. We're out here. You can come, see us any day, right? Yeah.
Right. That's it. That's my message.
All right.
Short
Beautiful.
and simple.
Well, short, simple, and succinct, right? And powerful, I think. So thank you, Dakota, for joining the show. And we will be right back after a short break.
And we're back on Naptown People's Radio. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that from Dakota. Like, first off, I love Dakota just as a human being, but also as a comrade. And just hearing his experience. I remember when he was first talking about it, prior to recording, I was like, this is amazing and also outrageous and kind of infuriating. But like, it again reminds us of like, there's such an importance of being in a union, being a part of a union, all the amazing benefits that come with it, and why we should not be anti-union. We're in a weird time right now where anti-union sentiments are popping up, and it's very strange. And there are even people who are socialists. I'm not gonna get into the caveats there, but like. Derek might, but like I'm not going to get into the caveats right now, who are calling themselves socialists but are anti-union, which is like weird and kind of whack, honestly. And I just appreciate Dakota for like reminding us of the importance of unions. So, Thank God for Dakota. Thank God for unions.
Thank God for Dakota.
Thank God for Dakota. Yeah.
Shout out to Dakota.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Love Dakota.
He's our unspoken Circle City shout out. He
Yes.
Lucas,
I love that. Yes. So bringing it back, I think a conversation when we're talking about unions, we're talking about general strike. And like, what does that mean for everyone? What does that mean for the people? There's sometimes a misconception of like, who is a worker and what does that mean? I would like to get Derek's take on this. I would like to rap about this with Derek because that's not really like we use that language, but oftentimes we use language and we don't really know what that means. So like, what is a worker?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's many different ways to look at it, right? Mm-hmm. But from Marxist tradition, like not to go back to the great Marx because we don't do that. Because I was actually reading the introduction to a book that was talking about like why philosophy, right? Mm. Very few people read philosophers, nor do they need to. But we all have a world outlook, right? And the task of the philosopher is to make that world outlook and break it down, make it systematic, because the world outlook explains the world. So it has to be comprehensive. And so the philosophers are the ones who work that out in detail. And so by the time they're done, it's like, I don't know if I can read this, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to. Some people do. But unless we have that spelled out, right?
Yeah.
We can't do battle with other dominant worldviews.
Yeah.
And so that's why I want to go to Marx, right? And the fact that Marx did this shows it, like wrote Capital, shows that it wasn't his idea to like, oh, let me examine capitalism, right? It was the social forces that made him do that. Not the idiosyncrasies of his writings, maybe they're his, but it's not a work of a great genius or something like that, right?
Right.
So, but there's a great misunderstanding, especially the first one I'll address is between those who produce surplus value and those who don't produce surplus value.
Yeah.
So, there's this line in Capital where it's like basically something that along the lines of the effect of like, a schoolmaster who beats his teachers, to a private school, to get the maximum work out of them per day. It doesn't matter if they're producing diplomas or at the sausage factory, right? They're both producing surplus value, right?
Okay.
Now, there's a whole bunch of others who aren't producing surplus value.
Yeah.
But that's Capital's definition.
Mm-hmm.
One. That's not Marx's definition.
Absolutely.
He doesn't care if you're, whatever. Because in order for surplus value to be produced, it has to be realized, transported, distributed, right? Sold. So the checkout person, without them, it's not happening, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention that the working class has to be reproduced. And so Marx also writes about that. And one definition he gives is everybody who is subjected to the rule of capital is a worker. So unless you are the one who's able to dictate what times you can go where, what spaces you can move through, et cetera, and that of others, you're a worker.
Yeah.
Right. And then he also talks about several different kinds of workers, right, including the lumpen proletariat, which is one translation. The other translation is the dangerous classes, and that's the one in the International Publishers, the OG translation. And I think they're dangerous because these are the ones who are, back in Marx's time, he's studying England, who were being kicked out the fields and sent to the cities, and many of them were just like, I don't want to work in these factories for like 18 hours a day and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So they would just turn to like the black market, the gray market, semi-gray market, beggars, crime, some petty theft sometimes, irregular employment. We see this today with gig work.
Absolutely.
And so actually a lot of what he's writing about, like 1867, is relevant today. And he also talks about those who are incarcerated, right? They are also workers, right? So basically, unless you wake up in the morning and you got like a jet lined up to go someplace or a helicopter, you're a worker.
Yeah.
99% of us are workers. Now, working classes of the world unite was a slogan until the Bolshevik Revolution, which then it became working and oppressed people unite. Because oppressed people work and they're exploited as workers, but they're also oppressed based on their national identity, gender identity, and so on and so forth. And so we want to acknowledge and give, proper analysis so that we can intervene properly to destroy not that identity, of course, but the fact that identity has anything to do with the unequal distribution of power.
Right. Like that super exploitation. Right. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's important because workers are not just like, even though Derek is also Professor Ford, right? Like Derek is still a worker, just like somebody who is cleaning hotels downtown. Now, that exploitation looks different, right? Like, and we acknowledge that, and we should acknowledge that. If you're not acknowledging that, that's weird. We are still all workers, right? We are still all being exploited by the same system. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that listeners, and also it's good to like go over that with each other. Of like, because what are we? Because like also like, what are we fighting for? What are we here for? What are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? But sometimes, and maybe it's because I'm a Gemini, but I'm always like, what? Like, explain the language to me. That was one of my first conversations with Derek. Was like, man, you keep calling me a comrade, and I don't know what that means. You got to tell me what that means, right? So but language is important, and we shouldn't just use it just because, like, yeah, okay, I'm a worker. Okay, what does that mean, hun?
Yeah, because we should know it, because then we can become conscious of the fact that we have more in common with each other than we do with our bosses.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Our undercover bosses. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And, just to tie that finally back to the general strike, because that's a strike of all workers, right?
Yes.
So that means that this May Day, there's been a call for general strike that's taking off. And that all workers should call off, whatever you got to do, strike, there's going to be things happening at the Indianapolis Liberation Center. There's going to be things happening at other places as well. And you can check those out in the show notes, but come here, because that's when we get together and we start to build and we start to realize the commonalities we have, that there's a common root of our problems, and that we can get together and eliminate that root.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah. There's going to be a rally May 1st. We're going to be here May 1st. There's also going to be a barbecue May 2nd here at the Indy Liberation Center.
Yeah, we're doing a block party.
Yeah, like a block party.
Yeah, come through 12 to 5.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. We'll have stuff for the kids.
I'm going to be there.
Danny's going to be there, most importantly. I think I should have led with that. My bad. Cut? No.
Derek's going to be there. No. But it's a time to get together, and it's a time to be together. We were just doing outreach, a couple of us in the neighborhood where the Liberation Center is, and it was so cool to just meet the people who work in this neighborhood, who live in this neighborhood. And it's always a good reminder of like, yeah, we got more in common. It was so funny. We went to this Mexican restaurant, Los Luchadores, which everybody should go because they're so nice in there. I mean, you should go just in general, but they're really nice in there. And we like gave them the flyer, and there's a line in the flyer about like, opposing Trump. And the guy was like, oh yeah, okay, we'll put this up in the window. I was like, I love it. So yeah, pull through so that we can meet you. And we're all workers. Yeah.
We have the capacity to make the world run. We have the capacity to shut it down.
Absolutely.
We have the capacity to run it under our thought out plan. So there's not this anarchic production of capitalism that results in a surplus of houses and a surplus of homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that's important to remember about the general strike is that there's no way we can lose, right? Like, do we know what's going to happen? Do we know what it's going to look like exactly? No, because there's no way for us to predict that. That's just literally impossible. Unless you got like a crystal ball, then hit me up. But like, we can't lose because we're coming together, we're working together. And when we're together, that's always going to be a win.
Yeah. And, how do we learn to strike? But by striking.
Exactly.
Yep. And people look at, the law is reactive. It's not as if like the courts were like, hey, now you guys can strike. And then people started striking. No. Yeah. They lost their lives like in that struggle, you know? And so, yeah, I like that point. We should go out on that. Like, we can't lose this general strike, because if anything, it's going to be an advance, like a step forward in the consciousness of workers in Indianapolis. We're going to meet new workers, connect with them, you know, find a lot of points of unity. You know, we don't have to be 100% unified. That's not desirable or possible, but we're going to find a lot of like-minded people. We think we're the only ones, you know, like at our jobs, but we're not. And so come to the Liberation Center and let's build community as workers, you know.
Okay, so we're going to do the Circle City shout out, and today's Circle City shout out goes to Dani Ortiz. So we had Dani on the show a few episodes ago in which he let us know about the medical neglect. I feel like that is the most tame way to put what he was talking to us about. But the medical neglect taking place at Miami Correctional Facility, also known as the Speedway Slammer. And, you know, it really takes guts, it takes revolutionary optimism to be able to speak up against the cops, but even more so when you are behind enemy lines. You are literally at their mercy, you know, can't even get up by yourself. And to speak up, you know, not only has he made a difference for listeners, you know, just raising our consciousness, but there's now a lift in the facility. So he's made a difference for himself. He's made a difference for all the others who go through Miami Correctional and need that support. And, you know, hopefully making a difference for all prisoners, you know, like, because they are aware that we're watching and we're listening and we're paying attention and what is going on here. And, you know, he didn't just speak about his own struggles, right? He enforced, you know, and his enforced inability to get out of the bed for months, the canceled visits, but about the other inmates, including the ICE detainees, right? He told us they banded together and that they were the ones who looked out for each other, right? Not the people who were literally being paid to do that, but one another, right? And so, well, a few days ago, we received word from Dani's closest friend, and also the last one to visit him. So she said, Dani, aka Jose Ortiz, and I want to thank everybody for calling and or emailing the IDOC regarding the broken Hoyer list, as the problem has now been rectified as a new lift came in this week at Miami for the medical unit inmates. So like that was, which I like feel a little emotional because like, you know, we just had this idea to have this podcast like last year, and we were like, I think this will be a good idea. And like, the people, I think it'll be good for the people of Indianapolis. And like the people of Indianapolis, the listeners, you know, like, and also the people who are like paying attention to Instagram and everything, like came together and were able to help Dani and able to help all of the people who are in Miami Correctional. And that's like, yeah, I feel a little emotional because like that's like in real time, look at the difference that the people that we're able to make, you know. And if it wasn't for people listening, if it wasn't for people caring, and just paying attention to one another and looking out for one another, this would not be possible. But if it wasn't for Dani being like, I do not care, I'm going to talk about what's going on here, and not just to me, but for everyone in here, just like the bravery that it took for him to do that, and look at what happened. Look at the difference that he was able to make, you know. So man, that's like not gonna cry on here, but yeah. So you know, there are still like so many changes that need to be made towards the treatment of, you know, our brothers and sisters behind enemy lines. But Dani has shown us an amazing example of what it can look like and what it takes to be revolutionary. And it's not, again, I always say this, not just like going to a protest, right? It's not just like making a banner or a flyer. Like sometimes it's doing an interview. Sometimes it's just talking about the mistreatment that has happened to you and others that you care about. And for our listeners, you know, never forget that small acts like making calls and emailing can result in victories that are both small and significant. So shout out to Dani Ortiz.
Yeah, revolutionary salute, Dani Ortiz, because he was like, I don't care if my name's out there. I guess there's a new rule where now we can't cry. I was actually going to cry, but now I've suppressed those
I'm a
feelings,
therapist.
and
I would
so,
never tell you not to cry. I just wouldn't be able
just
to
not on the
keep
show.
speaking
Okay.
if I was
All right.
crying.
No, shout out to Dani Ortiz. There's many events coming up at the center, too many to list. So just go to IndieLiberationCenter.org and you'll see them all. Sign up for our newsletter and check out the show notes. I do want to call your attention, though, to a fire sale that the Indie Liberation Store is having on on our education section, because now that Hogsett, has tried to, put the final nail in the coffin of public schools, we got books that explain not only how this happened, how the privatization of schools happened over time, but also, our resistance to that. We can't use the same educational tools and logics and pedagogies that they have.
Right.
We have to use radical ones, revolutionary oppositional ones. And so we have both educational policy discounts, 20% off all of those books, and a radical education discount, 20% off all those books going from now until the end of the week. So go to IndieLiberationStore.com, get your order for shipping counts, anywhere in the domestic quote unquote United States, and then pick it up at the store or just come by and peruse our selection here live. And
Peruse.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
All right. Thank you. All right. That's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, or show some love by donating at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at IndieLiberationStore.com or coming in. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my comrade and co-host,
Dani Abdullah.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We say all power to the people. That means that we are our own liberators. We don't depend on nobody else. We depend on ourselves. And we take responsibility for ourselves. And therefore, we step up for our organization. Those that have proven by their actions and their practice that they represent for us. All power to the people and peace.
Collaboration. We act as if there's a scarcity of rights. If gay people get rights, women can't have rights. But that's not true. A victory for one is a victory for all. As Dan's just saying, And
you talk about people being fearless in the face of whoever there is. They don't care. To the Liberation Center, I would say, this is what we need.